Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is an Arkansas Arts and Fashion Forum in Conversation event. As I think most of the people here know, Arkansas Arts and Fashion Forum is a nonprofit based in Northwest Arkansas that is elevator pitched, focused on incubating the fashion industry in Arkansas. We do a lot of other programming. Since COVID, we've done a lot more sort of deep dive, heavy social engagement programming. And I am very, very excited about tonight's event because we get to talk about sparkly things and beauty and fashion and all the kind of stuff we talked about before the world did what the world is doing now. So I won't call it ended. Didn't end. We're still in it and going. So we're very excited to have Kerin Rose Gold with us tonight. She was meant to be a guest at our spring shows. So this is just a sort of late date on an appearance that she was meant to make in March. And hopefully when travel is allowed, we will be able to bring her IRL to Northwest Arkansas to tell us all of her secrets of the crystal arts. But until then, we'll have to chat. So Kerin has been pushing boundaries since 2009 with her luxury artisanal eyewear. A-Morir?
Correct.
Yeah, it's French. As seen on the world's biggest pop stars and sold in high-end boutiques across the globe, A-Morir sets itself apart with rebellious designs and impeccable handcrafted execution. Yet, this trendsetting brand is just one outlet for Kerin's irreverent and unique spirit. An upstart creator since childhood, this native New Yorker graduated with honors from NYU with a degree in pop culture history, linking her loves of art, music, and costuming while delving deep into French existentialist concept of spectacle. That sounds all right. That checks out.
Thanks.
Kerin continues to connect far-flung creative dots in her adult career, whether designing the first women's sneaker for SUPRA, starring in ad campaigns for Sebastian Professional. Was that meant to be with an accent?
No, Sebastian, it's okay. The hair care line, and Sebastian Professional is like the proper name of it, yeah.
That would make also checks out. You should be a hair ambassador, absolutely. She also writes a bi-monthly column for Nylon and has represented US as Vogue Italia's new talent and emerging designer. Becoming an eyewear icon was never part of the plan for Kerin, but it fits. No one sees the world quite like her. A little bit about A-Morir, her eyewear brand. What began as a custom work with Rihanna, Katy Perry, and Lady Gaga in 2008 has evolved into a true luxury brand whose pieces are praised by Vogue Italia as the favorite eyewear brand of American stars. Year after year, A-Morir has cemented its place as the go-to brand for daring, couture-worthy sunglasses and statement pieces. It is an ever-experimenting brand and ever-expanding. New takes on old favorites come effortlessly with the launch of objects and home good pieces, the development of a customization studio and crafting classes, as well as working with corporate and private clients alike. Correct me if I'm wrong, but one of your most recent pieces was a diaper pail for Katy Perry.
Correct, a 22-inch high, fully crystallized diaper. Uh-huh. Yes.
What I want to know is, team, where was mine when my second was born? It's finishing the bio. A-Morir is a mainstay in high-end and cutting-edge editorials around the world with a who's who of devoted repeat clientele. Beyonce, Rihanna, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Snoop Dogg, Nicki Minaj, Grace Jones, Debbie Harry, Blondie, all have purchased multiple pairs of A-Morir over the years. The brand's coveted pieces are made to order in limited quantities, ensuring the highest level of exclusivity. So, Kerin, thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled to have you here, and let's just jump in. So you and I were introduced in late 2019 by our mutual friend, Gabrielle Korn.
The most angelic angel of them all, yes.
The actual best person. And like I said, you were supposed to come down as a mentor for our designer cohort in the spring. But here we are. Do you want to, just as a baseline, tell our audience a little bit about your artistic practice? Just, give them a foundation before we dive deep into everything else.
Oh, yeah, sure. And before I get into that, a huge thank you for having me. I'm super, super excited about this. I really love everything that that y'all are doing. Y'all is my favorite gender neutral word, by the way, even though I'm a Northerner. And I feel very honored to be here. I will also probably be touching my hair more than normal because whenever I get it freshly done, it always feels a little funny. Not in like a chemical way, just like, there are oils in it that are not normally there. So apologies in advance. So I started A-Morir. It was really something that was a part-time hobby that became a full-time hobby that became a business. And my creative practice is very crystal art focused. By crystal art, we mean bling crystals, not healing crystals. And what I love to do is I do two things. One is I take ordinary, I like to take something ordinary and make it extraordinary. And for me, a huge part of my creative practice is seeing how far I can push whatever medium I'm working with. So at first it started with sunglasses and eyewear, where it was sort of, the intention was like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm an eyewear junkie, I'm super into eyewear, this is like the field that I want to get in. It was just, to me, there was a creative lacking in that field, and it was a place where I could see all of these ways to make really special things. And so it's sort of what became my creative, like I like to say, I guess I like to say that eyewear is really just the canvas that I'm using at the moment. And so I did 10 years where it was just experimenting on eyewear and seeing what I could do, how I could push that boundary farther. And then when even though, yes, I built myself a reputable eyewear business, I got kind of burnt out on it because there were so many other brands that were coming in and doing things that were similar to what I was doing, which is fine. Like, that's what happens when you start a trend, or when you bring a trend back. Eventually, other people are going to capitalize on that as well. And I just got super burnt out, and then realized that what I was really passionate about was the crystal work. And then once that light went off in my head, I began doing objects, I began doing earrings, I began doing home goods. Like, I started doing all of these other things that weren't part of the repertoire when I thought, like, oh, I do eyewear, and eyewear is all I do. That answer went a little off the rails, but I think I got there most of the way.
Yeah, I think you got there. So the brand itself, A-Morir, began as a collaboration with Rihanna. Is that?
No. So
origin story is not true. Okay.
Yeah. So she and I have collaborated before. That is true. But the brand, it was one of those things where I was someone, like, I feel like you're either a creative person or you're not. You don't have a choice, and you don't have a choice on what side of the fence you fall. And I'm on the creative side, and so I've been like making my own clothes and like tinkering with things, and I'm very into. I come from a very like DIY punk rock background, and so in that culture, there's a lot of, like, hey, if something rips, you sew it back up. Hey, if you get a vintage jacket, you get patches of your favorite band, you put them on the jacket. And so I've always been very good at taking something that's existing and remixing it in a way that was unique to me. And I've been doing that my whole life. And I've also been working with crystals, with flat back crystals, for, at this point, probably about 25 years, like, just in my own creative practice. And so with the eyewear, it was one of those things where I was in between jobs. I had just gotten fired from a job. I was when I grew up, when I was 16, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And when I got fired from my last office job, I was 25. And it was the first time that I'd been in remission. So the first time in 9 years that I had a healthy functioning body. And I decided to give myself, I'd never spent any money that I made at these like very poorly low paying jobs because I was always worried I would get sick and would need something to fall back on. So when I finally got fired when I was in remission, I was like, you know what? I have this like very meager savings. I can collect unemployment. I'm going to get a part-time job so that I can make ends meet. And I applied to grad school and figure out, and I really wanted to go work at the Met. I applied to and got into the NYU Masters in Costuming History program. But then I had all this free time, and I've always had art supplies lying around. Like, if you're a creative, you just have all this. Am I allowed to curse on this? I'll try not.
Yes,
okay.
Sure.
Like, I just had all this shit lying around. Like even now I have, I love acrylic painting. I don't do it very often, but that is a practice that I was taking painting classes when I was 5. And so I have just like hundreds of tubes of non-dried up acrylic paints, like in a closet in the apartment right now. And so I had all these crystals lying around from stuff I had done in high school and stuff I had done in college. And I just started going back and I was like, oh, you know what? Like I have all this free time. Like I finally have time to do some art again. And at the same time, I'd also lost my last pair of sunglasses. And I've always worn like very large maybe less so now, but back when I had the energy for it, I'd always wear like everything was a super large statement accessory. All of the shoes were super high heeled. And I was like, well, it's summer. I need some new glasses. Everything out is boring. And I was going for like, $10 off the street glasses. And I was like, all of these are super boring. But if I put crystals on them, they look super cool. And that was the first time that anything I'd ever made had garnered a really intense positive reaction from people. And so I'd be walking down the street and I'd get stopped on the street and people would ask me where I got my sunglasses from, which is something that never happened to me with any other item of clothing in 15 years that I'd ever worn and, made and then worn. And at the time my part-time job that I wound up getting after a while was at the Patricia Field store. For anyone who doesn't know who Patricia Field is, she's now most famously known because she was the stylist of Sex and the City and the stylist of Ugly Betty. But I think it either opened in it opened in either the late 50s or the late 60s. I haven't brushed up on that in a minute, but she had like a sort of like just an alternative downtown creative upstart designer boutique for decades. It closed a few years ago. So it was, she had it for like 40 years. And that's where I was working. It was, I was able to walk there every day, so I didn't have to spend money on the subway to get to and from. And I was getting paid under the table in cash, so I could still collect my unemployment. Like these were some times. And I wore the glasses into the store, and they were just like on my head. And one of the buyers was like, where'd you get those? Those are great. And I was like, oh yeah, I made them the other day. They were like, okay, cool, make more and we'll put them in the store and sell them. And I was like, you can sell, like I can sell something I made. Like you want to sell, you think people will buy it? I didn't know anything. I had like a girlfriend of mine who had a jewelry line. Like she explained like a costing sheet to me and like how to do wholesale and like, because I was pricing my stuff at essentially what the supplies were. And she was like, what about your time? Like when you sell this to a store, it's half of that. I didn't know anything. And I genuinely didn't think that anything that I ever made of something anyone else would want to wear. And I was like, all right. And I took like the little bit of money I had and bought like a few more pair of sunglasses and a few different colors of crystals that were in a small enough size to do this project or to like make these things. And I brought them into the store and they sold out in like a week. And I was like, oh, and they're like, yeah, cool. Make some more, bring them in. I was like, oh, okay. I can do that. Sure. And so it was just one of those things where it was the matter of like, it was the right time for a new accessory trend like that. I was definitely in the right place. And then according to my parents anyway, I've always been very business minded, and I have a business savvy, one could say. And so it became very apparent to me, like, okay, you need to buy a domain, you need to have a website, you need to have a business card, you need to have an email address. You need to present it as though this is really something, even though you're, doing this on a very tiny table in your apartment at like 2 a.m. And that's the origin story. And yes, there was obviously, with everything, there's a lot of people's success, mine included, does depend on a bit of luck. But there is a lot of work that still goes into everything that I do all the time.
Sorry.
No, I could. You can cut me off every time I ramble. A cutoff is helpful by all means.
So one of the things we talk about here in Arkansas a lot is this idea of self-identifying as something as a way of getting there. So like, when you mentioned you're doing the work on a small table in your office and you just had enough money to buy the domain, you just had enough money to buy the supplies to start, it would be a stretch to call yourself, some people would say, it would be a stretch to say, I am now a crystal artist, or I am now an accessories designer. But I'm of the opinion that you have to self-identify, you have to tell yourself that's what you are in the beginning of becoming that thing, because you have to create that creative persona. Do you think that that's like kind of how that begins?
So I used to be one way. I used to be the opposite of that, and now I'm very much that. So when I first start, for me, like I would have never. It took me. I don't think it was until I had put out my second collection that was going to show in Milan with Vogue Italia that I called myself a designer. Wow. When I was younger, for me, I thought that it was very arrogant to call myself a designer, when in my head, I was just some kid making some stuff. And I think that I did myself a disservice at first, but at the same time, I know so many people, like after I've never called myself a celebrity eyewear designer because it just sounds gross. And it's not my thing. I know of so many people who refer to themselves as celebrity eyewear designers when they don't really dress celebrities and they make really shitty eyewear. Kudos to them for being creative and expressing themselves creatively. But I never wanted to be one of those people. I never wanted to be someone who's like, I'm a designer, and it's like, you made one thing. Like, what do you mean? But when it comes to, and also I have, my husband is a DJ and owns a record label. He's had that business for 12 years. A bunch of my friends are legitimate, Grammy nominated, Grammy winning, touring musicians and DJs. I've got a ton of friends who are brilliant photographers, a ton of friends who are legitimate, brilliant artists and designers. And so it always rubbed me the wrong way when people would say, someone would say, this happens a lot with DJing, when someone would say, oh, I'm a DJ. And it's like, and this is in 2008, where it's like, oh, you just play songs off your iPod? Like, what? No, you're not a DJ. When there were so many people in my life who worked tirelessly day in and day out to be recognized for that craft. And so there is a part of me that feels as though calling yourself something when you're not is disrespectful to the people who are that. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't even until maybe 2 or 3 years ago where I was comfortable calling myself an artist. And I wonder if that, and I think that did a disservice. And I think that it's important to I think that it's important to know what you want to do and to have goals. And I think that it's important to know where you want to land, even though that can change, and it should change, and it probably will change. But I think it might not be the best to call yourself that outwardly, because I think that I think that you do have to earn your stripes a little bit, but you need to recognize that within yourself. You need to and that I think is super important. And this could be like me, this could be me and my ego or something, or just being like a bitter old lady, a bitter woman, just like, well, I had to work so hard to become, like I had to walk, 5 miles up to my studio in order to call myself an artist.
I think more what I'm getting to is, no, I totally understand. Like if you have made one garment, we probably shouldn't let you self-identify publicly as a designer, right? You've made one thing. But if you are somebody who has been working in their back room, creating for almost, even if it's for no audience, but you've like,
then you are absolutely. I think then in that case you are. And also a lot of this comes from 2008, 2009, when anyone with an iPhone camera could be like, I'm a photographer now. And it's like,
yeah, no, honestly, I think it is a totally different time, because I agree. In 2008, I was a lot stingier with labels. Like I was the beginning, that's the beginning of my curatorial career. And I was really picky about what people would call themselves in their creative practice based on what they had accomplished. But that was in a different market. In Arkansas, I think one of the things that we do at AAFF, and I kind of like to foster, is like, yes, you are. Sure you are. Why not? Right? Let's go ahead, because otherwise we'll never get there.
And to your point, I think that referring to yourself as an artist or as a creative is a really important place to start. And I think that also doing that is a lot less limiting. Because I do, but I think that you can do that if you're putting in the work, because I know so many people who have these, I'm a big fan of the statement, "You are not your job." And I believe that about myself as well. Like I have, a creative business, and I do art for a living, but I call myself an artist because that's just who I am inside. I mean, I also call myself a nice person because that's who I am inside, and I think that there are so many people that I know who work, in marketing, or work in accounting, or work in, HR, or do all of these different, what they get paid for isn't what they're doing at night. If you're going home and you're writing, 4 pages of your novel every night, even though you get paid working in an office somewhere, you can still call yourself a writer, and you should. You're like, I'm a writer, but I work in an office. I mean, you can also just call yourself a writer, but in a lot of social situations, people are going to be like, oh, so you get paid to write? And you can be like, no, I get paid to, crunch numbers, but this is what I am.
I mean, if we had to limit ourselves to what we got paid to do, there would be no artists.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I pay myself to email a lot,
I'm a professional emailer.
I think it's important if you're going to give yourself a label, put in the work. That's the only thing I ask. If you are an artist, if you are a designer, if you are a creative, call yourself that. Honor your work by calling yourself that. But don't call yourself that if you've never designed a garment, if you've never painted a painting, if you've never sculpted a vase, honor your work by calling yourself that, but don't call yourself that before you've actually put in the work.
I think that's fair. So I think, based on what I've learned from you, our conversations, and then also, social media, stalking you slightly.
I do that.
You have a very, what I would call, yes and attitude towards collaboration and production and basically all the things. I feel like when I watch you on social, it's like, what is Kerin getting into today? What new direction are things going? You know, going from eyewear to doing boots, to doing canes, to doing, like, it's just sort of a, yeah, sure, like, yeah, we're gonna do it, right? Can you talk about your attitude towards collaboration, towards production, and then also give advice to emerging creatives? There's a couple emerging designers on this call who may be considering a collaboration, and just like, what does people need to be aware of when entering into those kinds of working relationships?
For sure. I mean, I spent a lot of years saying no to things because they weren't, I for a really long time, I kept myself in that eyewear box because I was getting a lot of advice from industry professionals who were also very much part of the old guard, who were like, if you have an e-commerce site that makes you look cheap, if you do more than the one category you're in, it's going to confuse your customer. You have to develop these wholesale relationships or you're not a real designer. And at the end of the day, you have to think what makes me happy, and like what makes me happy, number one, by far and away. And further down the line too is, will this pay my bills? Because if you want to be a full-time creative, unfortunately, we live in a patriarchal capitalist society, and we have to pay our rent. We've got to pay to live places. We've got to pay to eat food. So once I freed myself from that box, and the reason I did actually was because a few stylists started saying, hey, you do this great crystal work on eyewear. Can you do it on a pair of shoes? Can you do it on a hat? Can you do it on a bodysuit? Can you do it for a performance? And until someone opened that door for me, it didn't occur to me like, oh yeah, this can be a totally different stream of income. And I didn't even put that. I had two separate. I kept those, even like my social media presence, I kept those totally separate for a really long time, until 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think. Because I was like, no, I do eyewear. And like, yes, even though Lady Gaga and her backup dancers are wearing this stuff that I had customized on a tour, I don't need, it doesn't seem professional to put that on my eyewear, brand Instagram. And it's like, no, put it all together. It's all coming from your hands. Put it all in the same place. And so the yes and the collaboration stuff for me, it's really, it's half, I would say it's partially commission, partially creative collaboration. But it came about from, it started because people said like, hey, you can do this. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. And then it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. And I just sort of built up this portfolio of custom work. And now it's, I would say probably, well, maybe not now because no one's really performing now, but I would say it splits the business about 50-50. And then that got me thinking about like, well, what other things can I do? What other services can I offer? And I think, it's so great. It's so great that like the internet has a lot of terrible things on it, so many terrible things, but the internet is also wonderful. Someone can see something that someone can find me just because they input some keywords into a search engine. And I've developed a lot of really great clients that way. I've gotten great clients off social media. And my relationships with these stylists that I've been working with, some of them for like 11, 12 years, is just, they know that they can say, hey, we need this thing done. The turnaround time is really quick. You're going to do it well. Can you do it? And with a smile on my face and a song in my heart, I do it. Mainly because it's all I really want to do anyway. But also it's, from a business standpoint, it's hard to find someone who's good, and it's hard to find someone who's quick. And like, I'm definitely, you can probably find lower priced crystal artists on the market, but you won't get good and you won't get quick from them. And I'm reliable and I'm professional, and all of those things will take you super, super far if they're habits that you get into from jump.
Well, and you have such a proven track record at this point. Like, there are so many things you can point to and say, Kerin did that on this tour, Kerin did that for this project. And so I'd actually like to sort of expand on that a little bit. It's no secret you've got some stuff featured in Beyonce's upcoming Black is King project, which I think we are all dead about.
As am I.
This is a Zoom call of ghosts, as it would be.
Yeah.
But can you demystify the process of working with stylists a little bit? Like, how does that work? How do you get eyewear onto Beyonce? Like, what universe is that?
Absolutely. I know, if you're not in the creative field, there are a lot of things that, everything seems like magic. And people think, oh, you made something for Beyonce. What is she like? And I'm like, I've never met Beyonce. You'd see a photo of that if I had met Beyonce. I've been very fortunate that I've become friends with some of my like more high profile clientele. Does that mean we like hang out? No, it means I see them, in a work situation potentially. But with working with stylists I fully create, like, they are their own creative, like, they are a creative solar system in themselves. A lot of stuff, I think some stylists get too much credit, a lot of stylists don't get enough credit, but they're image makers essentially. And so these stylists, sometimes it's by request, sometimes it's by talent request, sometimes it's not. But stylists, and at this point, because I have an established brand, I don't necessarily need to do much outreach. But stylists will see something on Instagram, I send out press mailers, like, whenever there's something press worthy, or they'll go to my website, or they're planning a shoot, or they're planning a thing for one of their clients, and they'll email me and they'll say, like, hey, this is what we're doing. We'd like X, Y, and Z. Is it available? Can you loan it to us? Or it'll be like, hey, we're doing this thing. We want something customized. We need it in X days. Like, is this something you can do? And so and for me, because I'm well enough established and I'm very easily reachable, I'll just get emails in my inbox, which is a very fortunate place to be, but it takes a while to get there. Like, that doesn't happen overnight. And so if you're a young creative, if you're an upstart, like, I still do this today. Billie Eilish stylist is a woman named, she does Billie Eilish, and she does Rosalia, and she does Diplo. She does Katy Perry sometimes. This woman, oh my goodness, and I'm totally blanking on her name. It's Samantha Burkhart. Oh my gosh. Like, I actually DM'd her a while ago, and I was just like, hey, this is me. This is what I do. I'm a huge fan of what you do. If you ever need anything, please let me know. And I was quite pleased when she wrote back. She's like, oh, I know exactly who you are. Your work is really great. You're in the back of my mind for things. It's like, cool. And so, like, I'll straight up send people fan letters. Like, I'll write fan mail as the subject line. One, because I think it's kind of fun. Like, who sends fan mail anymore? But there's no harm in reaching out to people. Find out, if there's an actor or an actress or a musician or some other kind of performer or a politician that you really like. Mm-hmm. The internet will tell you who styles them, and the internet will lead you to their information. And so if you just have, if you're just like, hey, this is me, this is what I do, here's a link to my stuff, a photo of one of my favorite things is attached. I really love the work that you're doing with so-and-so because of 1, 2, 3, because we love the rule of threes. If there's anything you ever need, please reach out to me, you via this email, or my phone number is blank. Have a beautiful day, fondly, your name. It's pretty easy. A lot of people won't respond to you, and that's fine. And you can always, I don't know on other phones, but iPhone has a great send again feature where you just, if you go into your sent mail, you pull up that email, and instead of like forward or reply, it's a little square that makes arrows, and it goes send again, and it sends the same email again. So there are ways to, I'm wearing pants, by the way. There are ways to just sort of make your life easier that way. But yeah, there's no harm in reaching out to people. And as annoying as social media is, like as annoying as Instagram is, I really hate being on Instagram, because it's like the mouse with the sugar water, where you just kind of keep going back for another hit. It's a psychological, it's like going into a casino. I've never really been into it, but psychologically it's like going into a casino. There's a New York Times magazine article about this like 10 years ago that I think about all the time, about how like casinos were, psychologists were consulted in the making of slot machines and casino machines to get people to stay longer, because it like hits the lizard part of your brain where it needs it. That sounds super tinfoil hat, I know.
No, it's true. It's actually, that's science. That's totally true. And social media is the exact same thing.
Yes,
so
it's actual science.
That's hashtag science for sure.
Exactly. And we love science. But I'm not a huge fan of Instagram. I don't spend a lot of time on my social media. I'm not a person who plans ahead. My page doesn't have a look. I mean, crystals on my look, I guess. But it's, I have so many stylists or so many stylist assistants that will, and you can also reach out to assistants because they get way less mail. But there are so many people that just take screenshots of things on Instagram and they're like, hey, what about this? And you're like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, it's some crap I made for myself, but yeah.
So we are coming up on getting close to a question and answer block. So I'm going to ask one more question to you. That I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if anybody has questions, send them now. And then if not, I'm just going to keep going till time. Rachel has questions. Oh, wait. No, send them to Rachel.
Send them to me, yeah.
You
okay.
Send them to me, Rachel. Do you have a question? Just write it in the doc.
Just a question for me.
I'm here. I'm on it. So one thing I did want to ask you about, because I think that this is something I think about a lot, and I think that people who are emerging into their creative selves and who are starting their careers, I think we should talk about it more and think about it more, which is your brand, the brand that you create versus the person who you are. And, your brand is very much a reflection of who you are in a lot of ways, right? Like, you've got a brand image you've got the orange hair, which is a total signature and comes into play with a lot of your PR content has that kind of like, there's an orange color that I would almost say is the Kerin orange, right? If there's an Yves Klein blue, is there a Kerin Rose Gold orange?
I hope so, please.
Someday. So can you just talk a little bit about how you balance and keep yourself sane when you're dealing with the public Kerin versus private human Kerin?
So yeah, I can. So one thing that I actually thought about, I didn't really think about the name of my brand all that much. It was actually a weird t-shirt thing that I was going to do with another very good friend of mine at the time, and we just never did it. And then 3 years later, I was like, well, I guess I should name this something. And I hit her up and I was like, hey, I need a name for my eyewear stuff. Do you mind if I call it this? And she's like, no, go ahead. So, but the one thing that I knew about my brand is I wanted to be able to keep the brand and myself separate. So I did not name my company after myself because I didn't want I didn't want to be all consumed in that way. And also at the time, I didn't know if it was going to be successful. And it would have been really shitty to have a failed company named after you.
Yep.
But at the same time, I didn't want, it was a very conscious choice. Even thinking about it in a positive way, it was a very conscious choice not to name the company after me, because I didn't want to, like, as a kid, yes, of course, I feel like we all sort of wanted to be famous for some, be it like I wanted to be a gymnast and I think a pop star probably at the same time. But it, I didn't want to, I think especially because as a sick person, as someone who was physically disabled for 9 years, me and my body and my, and my, me and my body were part of the conversation nonstop for 9 years, and it was exhausting. And when I finally was able to, and also like I worked in the music industry. Weirdly enough, none of my music clients came from my music industry past. But I'd spent so many years in the music industry, and I spent so many years as a sick person. And I also hated how in the music industry, you really are your job. You are the company that you work for. At least it was back in like the early 2000s. And I remember, oh my God, I was at a concert, and I was at a concert, and it was like after the show, and there was a bar in the basement, and I ran into my ex-boyfriend. I mean, I was gonna say ex-boyfriend at the time, but he's still my ex-boyfriend today. But we were recently broken up, and he worked at a music marketing company, and I had just gotten fired from a music marketing company. And he was like, oh, this is like so-and-so from this label, and this is so-and-so from this label. And then he turns to me and he's like, and this is Kerin. She used to work at this company. And I got so mad, and I was like, yo, you can just say this is my friend Kerin. You can say this is my ex-girlfriend Kerin. Both of those things are more interesting than like she got fired from this company. And I think sort of all of those things together made me want to make sure that there could be some separation. Granted, when you start working for yourself, there kind of is no separation between your job and your life. But it was important for me to have a literal verbal boundary. Shoot, I forgot the question.
Well,
I forgot. Yeah.
But also, so yes, the A-Morir brand is separate, but then there's also this sort of Kerin Rose Gold brand. Like, you are a little bit of a public figure, right? And so you obviously,
you reluctantly. The hair makes you think I really want it, but I promise you I don't.
So how do you in your head keep yourself grounded, right? From, there's a certain level of like proximity to celebrity, and Kerin Rose Gold being a, kind of a phenom thing, being featured in Vogue Italia, and and then there's Kerin, who like is a human.
Yeah. And so, go ahead. Keep finishing.
Oh no. So just how do you square those two things together?
I mean, a big thing for me is I keep a lot off the internet. I've never been particularly public, and again, and this probably has a lot to do with like just being sick, and, like my body was like the game of operation for a long time. And so so for me, there was just a lot I keep private. Like I've been a gym rat. So I got my first gym membership when I was like 15. And I've been a gym rat probably ever since. There is maybe one photo of me in workout clothing on the internet from the last 10 years. Because that's just something that I do for me. It's not something that is public. So I make a very conscious choice. Everybody can make a conscious choice about what they want to share. And I do that in a very restrictive way. So there's just a lot that I keep private. There are a lot of like hobbies and things that and creative pursuits that I just do for me. And so the internet just never gets to see it. When you are behind a brand, especially one that deals with a lot of celebrity, it behooves you to accept interviews when people want to interview you. It behooves you to put your face out there in some way. And and then for me, I also, by being able to keep myself separate from the brand, I think it gave me the freedom to do things like write editorials for various publications. During quarantine, I've also done some teen Vogue writing. Thank you. And it lets me be able to, and then it frees me to explore these. Like I've been doing some work with clay at home, and I make these 3D sheet cake paintings, and I do all of these things that are just very much separate to me. And they're things and I share them because I sort of really, especially in the last year, have really pulled back on sharing stuff on my personal Instagram. Mm-hmm. And I don't really do Facebook, and I don't really do Twitter anymore. They're just sort of more things to have so that you can find me at other places. But I've selected the things that I feel like sharing, and I'm very specific with what they are. And because I've sort of subconsciously made the decision that like most of what I share on the internet is going to be about my art, because that's the only part of me I really feel like sharing publicly. Because for so long I wanted to, I think that in 10, 20 years, there might be a total transition to just working with art. And so you have to sort of lay that groundwork. So I'm laying it now because it's important.
Very smart. So
yeah.
Somebody actually asked a question about the sheet cakes. So I want to bring it up. On your website, you do have items listed, and this is an audience question. You have items listed that are not crystal based. Do you find it difficult to stretch beyond your main line of work that you are recognized for? Or does your audience understand that the rest of your art outside of your typical style? Does that
I can answer that. That's totally true. So I felt like I needed to be boxed in for a long time. I thought that I could only do eyewear, that it could sort of look however I wanted. It was because it was all just like ostentatious and very covered and very embellished. But I think that I think that trying different kinds of mediums and experimenting and making all different kinds of things, you will find some things that you're better at, and some of those things won't be in line with whatever your brand is, and that's okay. And there's nothing, especially now when when so many people are, when like being sort of a multi-pronged creative is looked at as a positive now in a way that it wasn't really 10 years ago. I think that people get really excited to say like, oh, this person makes clothing and they also paint. Like I'm thinking more so of jewelry designers, but there are a number of jewelry designers that also make beautiful pottery that look nothing like the jewelry. But then you see the through line and you're like, oh, well, there's sort of this through line of like these sculptures are like, oh, the shapes are very similar. So I think that when you're making something that isn't, when you're experimenting and falling in love with a creative field that isn't necessarily something that reflects your brand, there's going to be a natural through line there, and it's just up to you to figure out what that is. And the only reason you need a through line is if you're going to market it as something else that you do. And because building a website, you can do that in an afternoon now. If let's say you're a clothing designer and you're also a painter, you can have, you have your drop down menus and like, okay, it's it's like shirts and it's separates and dresses and outerwear and accessories, and then paintings. Or it could even be like, so it's fine. Just be like, not clothing. Think of a cool portmanteau for like not clothing or something, which I guess would be nothing. But don't use nothing as a portmanteau for not clothing, please. But
unless you do.
Unless you do.
Unless it's great. Unless it's great.
So all you have to do, and listen, for so many of the collections that I did, I made the collections, and then I thought, what could be the story behind these? I never start out with a story. I start out with the materials, and then I make up the marketing afterwards. And so you can do that with your other, if you're a clothing designer who's also a painter, then it's like, okay, I made this series of paintings. What's the fake story I can tell about these paintings in relation to my brand? That's all you have to do.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any. I think that there are a lot of sort of industry. There. Sometimes there's expectations that you're going to do everything in this linear fashion, or that that certain industries, like maybe fashion, doesn't have the same freedom that art has in terms of being a creative and being able to just create. Like you're not hemmed in by, oh, I'm a painter, so I can't be a sculptor, or I'm a songwriter, so I can't be a potter,
I bet there is a lot of that in the art world too, because people are known for their one thing. And then I think that people are probably feel just as boxed in the art world in that regard.
I think it's, in some ways, yes, but I think that but that's financial, right? So like you're going to sell this one set of work and you can still make whatever else you want because of that sort of, I'm an artist. That's what my experience is. That's what I've seen in that industry.
You know this world much.
I did a little bit of work in it, but what I love and what I'm trying to bring to what we do in Arkansas is it's one of the things I'm trying to bring home with me from my work in New York and New Orleans is that there's no do whatever you want, like it's do what you feel called to do, and you'll figure out how to tie it all back together when you need to tie it all back together.
I echo that sentiment as many percentage points as physically possible. I cannot echo that sentiment enough. I know that when I've sort of said fuck it and just experimented, whether it's with eyewear or with other crystal objects or whatever, or other mediums, when I've just said, what, I just want to make something for me, I want to make something that I love, those pieces have far and away done better than the things I made because I was like, well, this will be pretty. Far and away. I made this last year at some point. Because I also I stopped doing like spring and fall collections. I stopped sort of following the fashion calendar. I want to say probably 3 years ago, I stopped doing wholesale. I stopped doing trade shows because I was trying to fit into this mold of what I thought a designer should be. And my output was poor. I mean, it was prolific, sure, but it was not good. I was burning through money, and I was so bummed out on what I was doing. And I was like, well, this isn't why I'm not like the three things that I need to hit, I'm failing to hit. And I was like, you know what? I need to go back to doing this the way that I started doing this. And I need to start making things for me. And I made this one pair of sunglasses for me for fun. I'd envisioned it in my head. I purchased the supplies, and it has 75 feet of crystal chain coming down the fronts and on the sides. And I just put it on Instagram because I was like, this is a cool photo. And I got bombarded with people asking me when it was going to be for sale. And I was like, nope, people want to buy it. And it's for sale for $1,350. And I released that along with I want to say 8 or 9 other pieces because I was just sort of experimenting with this particular material. And I always have fun designing new things. And that piece sold 4 times better than any of the other pieces that I released that are all, $250, $300. You can wear every day. But this $1,350 chain monstrosity that I made purely for myself sold better than any of those. And there's a lesson to be learned there where, not only will your people find you, but when you make something that's like super authentic to you and super authentic to your craft, to your personality, to, even if like, I don't really ever have a message. I mean, my message is just like, I want to make beautiful stuff for beautiful people. And I don't mean beautiful in like the, Western hemisphere subjective, beautiful kind of a way. I mean, like, we're all beautiful people. Like, if you're a beautiful person inside, I'm making stuff for you. If you're a cool person, I want you in my stuff. I don't care if you have a Grammy. I don't care if you're, you know, living in your parents' basement. If you're a good person and my stuff makes you happy, I want you to have it. And so anyway, I think it's super important to do what makes you happy. I don't remember what the question was, but that's
you did it. You answered it perfectly.
Okay, great.
And so there's two more audience questions.
I need to get cut off.
I know. I'm like, when are we? Can I? Okay, but I will. I'm gonna shut.
Like, oh, okay, good.
I'll just shut you down next time. So 2 more questions, and then if anybody else has another question they want to ask, raise your hand. Is that we'll let people do actual questions. Okay. And then we'll go. How do you meet clients that you work with, and how do you get your foot in the door to do custom work for celebrities and their projects?
So I meet clients. Most of them I meet them virtually. I've had a website from maybe like as soon as I sold a piece of sunglasses in 2008, I had a website. I think that I meet my clients on the internet. A lot of them reach out, people either email me through the website, and I've far too many websites, but that's fine. They email me through my various websites, they DM me on Instagram. And I'm very lucky that at this point, 12 years in, I don't necessarily have to do a lot of outreach for that. But when you're first starting, and I didn't have to do a lot of outreach when I was starting, because when I was starting, if you wanted exciting sunglasses with crystals on them, I was literally the only person, aside from like Elton John himself, who could provide you with anything like that. And so
he was a little inaccessible.
Just a touch. His archive's hard to tap into. So yeah, so like how on a page, like on a trend page, it'll be like, floral dresses that are really in right now, and there'll be 12 different dresses in 12 different price points from 12 different designers. If in 2008, probably until about 2012, if you were going to do the top 10 crystal sunglasses, they would all be mine, because I was literally the only person making new stuff. And so when people wanted that, I was the only person available to do it. So back then I didn't have to do a lot of outreach. The key is, just like with anything, you've got to, have clean photos of your stuff. You can do that on an iPhone at this point. There's a website called removethebackground.com, which does exactly what it offers. So you can, take photos on like your well-lit floor on a balcony somewhere with good lighting. Get the photos cleaned up, have an elevator pitch for yourself, and do research and think about who you want to work with. Think about what kind of work you want to do, and then tell people why you would be the person to do it.
And I think that nowadays we can I'll just, because this is our audience and we try to help with this exact question. Slide in the DMs. Just get in there. Worst case scenario, they leave you on red.
Yeah.
And you just slide into some other DMs.
Exactly.
So.
DMs are super great. DMs are super handy. People DM me about, like, I've gotten commissions through DMs. I've had people DM me because they wanted stuff, and I'm like, yes, you want to pay me for this thing? Absolutely. Good stylists are always looking for the new, fresh, creative designer. Everybody wants to find that new special thing. So yes, you have to make sure that your work is good. So make sure that your work is good, and make sure there are easily accessible photos of it on the internet. Like, even if you just make an Instagram page where it's just like, these are the 20 things that I've made, and then you have a straight line to these people. And so you just go, you can send someone a phone and be like, hey, I'm a new designer. This is what I'm making. I love the work that you do with X, Y, and Z. if you ever want to borrow something, please let me know. I am not a fan of gifting people stuff because they have a lot more money than I do. But it could, there are times when it works in your favor because you can gift something to one high profile celebrity who goes on to wear it, and that can lead to 100 people buying that exact same thing. You can also gift something to somebody and then it gets given to their assistant and it never sees the light of day. So it's a game you have to play. If you do start loaning things out, have your paperwork together. Google, or sorry, I don't like using the phrase Google because it's a company. Search on the internet for a stylist, or search on the internet for a letter of responsibility. You can find a bunch of really great templates and, trick it out to where it has your information on it. Make sure that you have, a space for credit card information so that if something gets lost or broken or never returned, you
just run the card.
Yeah, exactly. You're able to do that. You can do that super easily now with, like, I don't know if I know Square is an option for running cards online where you just plug in numbers. If you have if you have a Shopify account, sometimes you can do that. If you use QuickBooks, you can do that. Know what a pull sheet, I'm assuming that y'all know what a pull sheet is, but if you don't, it's where it's an itemized list of, it's like the name, the important information of who's taking it out and when it's getting returned, and an itemized list of everything that's getting borrowed. You can include photos if you feel like it. I don't, because people borrow like 30 things at a time and I don't have time to put 30 photos onto a sheet. But keep track of all of your stuff, and every time you get an email address, put it somewhere. I use Google Docs for Google Sheets for a lot of that stuff. Like every stylist I've ever worked with, every journalist I've ever worked with, every buyer that I've ever worked with is on a different tab of that Google Sheet. Like people that I worked with in like 2010 are on this Google, because it used to be on like a different spreadsheet somewhere else. So keep track of all of that stuff because emails are like currency. Yes, go tell me.
Okay, I don't know if you guys can hear my children screaming, but we have reached the children screaming part of the Zoom call, so I'm going to mute myself after this one.
By the way.
Oh, good. The last time we did, a couple days ago, I got a note afterwards saying, like, are your children alive? There was some background noise. So, final question that we've got on the list. Are you running everything by yourself, or do you work with a team to do various parts of your business, accounting, website, shipping, social media, production? And how do you decide who to hire and how to help your business grow if you do have a team?
So the one thing I do have is an accountant. Having your money in order is having your money, being responsible with your money is going to save you so much heartache down the road. I love my accountant. He does a lot with small business and he's wonderful. I had an assistant for a long time. I had interns before, but for the most part, it's me, and then I'll hire sort of people as needed. For me, I realize I do a lot to sort of check. I do a lot of ego check-ins, and I check to see if I'm making a decision because it's actually what I want to do, or if it's something that I think will look good on social media, or that I can like brag about to people or put on my resume. And I base most of my decisions on things that I genuinely want to do. And I realized a while ago that for me, I didn't necessarily want to expand my business because I loved being a little speedboat. I loved being this, I'm a speedboat next to a barge. And a barge might have a lot of employees and might, bring in bring in a lot more money and have a much bigger presence, but it costs a lot of money to operate that. You have to make a lot of, if you're a bigger machine, you have to make a lot more decisions based on money. A lot of the creative things that you do aren't really creative. They're financial business decisions. And I realized that the things that I craved the most were creative freedom and full autonomy. And when you have employees, you owe it to them to be responsible to them. You owe it to them to make sure that you can keep the lights on, that you can keep paying them, that you can give them shit to do. And for me, and there was a time when I had an assistant for 4 years who was wonderful and I love her. And she actually now she has her own holistic skincare line. So she's not in fashion at all anymore. Not because of me. That was her choice. But there was a period of time where I'd outsourced all of the production to her because we do everything by hand. And I was so miserable and I couldn't figure out why. And I was like, oh, it's because I'm not making anything anymore. Like my job has sort of become business, paperwork, like computer pitch decks. And I hated it. And that was at a time when I was trying to expand. And I had interns and I had her. And I was like, you know what? This isn't how I want my life to be. But if you are looking to get bigger, A, there's nothing wrong with that. And B, the type of work that I do is very, very specific and it's very niche. So it doesn't make sense for me to try and grow that while still doing what I'm doing. But if you make something that is more sort of universally palatable and you want to grow the business, think about the things that you need. Think about the things that you're best at and think about where someone else could bolster you. Sort of like, the way Marc Jacobs had a Robert Duffy for a very long time, where he was this prolific creative and Robert Duffy was sort of the captain of that ship and sort of drove that ship. And maybe you're really good at both the business side and the design side, but you're terrible at production. So then you can find someone who can assist you with all of the production stuff. If I was me and trying to grow the business bigger, I would definitely look for a social media person because that's not something I enjoy. If you enjoy that and you're good at that, I know a good friend of mine has a brilliant jewelry line called Dylan Lex, and she does all of her social media herself because she's genius at it. She's really good. I mean, I'm sure that she has someone behind the scenes like helping with newsletters and stuff, but she's brilliant. And so she doesn't need someone to run her Instagram because she just has this innate, like, she just gets it in a way that I never will. So think about the areas that and if you're great at sales, maybe don't hire a salesperson. But if you're terrible at sales or you hate sales, that's where you can look into bringing somebody on. And maybe that sales, if you don't want to do wholesale, maybe that's someone who can sort of be responsible, like an office manager / like PA who pitches you to people. And so I think it's important to figure out where I see the hand is coming up. It's important to figure out what you love doing, what your strengths are, and then hiring to fill in your weaknesses.
Yes. Also, I would tag on to the end of that, in specific for people focused on fashion in Arkansas, contact us. I'm happy to walk you through like what the next business move might be. Because Keren's absolutely right. Employees are a responsibility and you want to make sure that you're making the right decision or you've made your life a lot harder. And that's not what anybody wants. So, does anybody want to raise their hand and ask one final thing to our wonderful guest before we all log off for the evening? Going. Okay.
Give me something. I'm fun.
So I'm going to wrap it up. I will say that my goal is that we get you back for a Zoom crystalling workshop.
I have adapted to Zoom crafting classes much better than I thought I would. Yes, that would be so much fun.
So that'll be the next step. And so if anybody has questions that they want to ask Kerin for next time, keep them in your noggin. Well, there will be a next time, and we'll be back in touch.
You can slide into my DMs.
Or you slide into those DMs. Well, Kerin, thank you so much. It's great to see you. I hope you're doing well in New York. I hope you're getting some fresh air every now and then.
I have 2 very tiny balconies, and I'm growing tomato plants on them, and they're almost ready to. I've eaten one. I've eaten 1 yellow tomato. I need to let them ripen. New York is my home. I'm great here.
You're doing better than me. I have a full-blown farm out there in my yard, and I have not one yellow tomato. I have many green tomatoes.
You know what? You have 2 children, and I have 0 children. So
it's true. And on that note, I actually do have to go stop the screaming. Everybody who came tonight, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We love our In Conversation series. Kerin, we'll see you soon. Everybody. This will be on our YouTube page within a couple days if you want to come back and dig into what we've talked about. Thank you so much
for having me.
Bye.
Yay.